Welcome to another sewing marathon. This sewing marathon is going to be different than our previous marathons. We are not all sewing the same pattern. We are instead going to stick to a theme. So today, each one of us is going to be sewing a different pattern, but all with the same theme of back to school. It can be either for the kids or for the parents, anything that can help make the back to school days more organized, more fun, and more convenient. For my video, I'm sewing up a pattern that I've been wanting to sew on my channel for a long time and just never got around to it. I love to batch sew, so typically what I'll do is I'll cut out a bunch of these and then I'll just sew them up all together. In a good day, I can sew about 6 of these in one day. I'm not expecting to do that now. I may not even get all of these done before this video goes live. So this pattern is called the Sew Together Bag. It is by Sew Demented. I'll have the link for how you can get this pattern in my description. I'm using fabrics from J&R Edwards, and I will go through each pattern piece as we sew it. This pattern has 3 zippers on it, and in between those zipper pockets is dividers, and so it is perfect for storing. Use them as a cosmetic bag, as a pencil pouch, for hair accessories, anything to keep things just a little more organized. So it's easy just to open it and find exactly what you need. So let's get started sewing my back to school pattern, the Sew Together Bag. The first thing you're going to do with this pattern is you're going to work on the side panels. You will have a pattern piece for these side panels. You will have 2 lining pieces and 2 exterior pieces. Your exterior pieces will be interfaced with a woven or non-woven medium weight interfacing like an SF101 or a Royal Pixie Light. Your lining pieces will not have any interfacing on them. What you're going to do is you're going to put right sides together, 1 lining piece, 1 exterior piece. Once you have a lining and an exterior right sides together, what you're going to do is you're going to start sewing at the bottom, go up to the top, pivot, go over, pivot again, and go back down. You're going to sew with the seam allowance given the pattern. You're definitely going to make for sure you back stitch when you start and stop. You're leaving this entire bottom open so that we can turn it right sides out. Once you have an exterior and a lining sewn right sides together, we're going to take the time to clip across these corners and then even here at the bottom. At the bottom, I'm just going to remove some of that bulk. I'll just kind of cut it at an angle there, not like a sharp angle, just kind of rounded. And at the top, I really want to get as much bulk as I can out of that area so that I can get a nice sharp point at this top edge. We're going to go ahead and push this right sides out, take it over to the iron if you need to, roll out your seams, and clip all along here so that everything looks nice and flush. You really want to make for sure that everything's lining up correctly and that you're only seeing the exterior fabric from the exterior side and the lining fabric from the lining side. Once you have it pressed flat and the seams rolled out, you are going to top stitch along those 3 edges that we just sewed and then baste that bottom close. For these side pieces, I definitely like it to be a contrast than my exterior. I love bright, strong colors for this bag, and especially for the sides, I like it to kind of pop. But if you don't want to, you could even make it all the same color. It's just something fun to have a lot of colors on this bag. I'm sewing all along this edge with the seam allowance given. Take the time to trim up this overhang here, make sure everything's pressed flat, and repeat that for your second side panel so that you have 2 side panels. The next thing we're going to do with this side piece is we're going to take out that paper pattern piece that we used to cut out the side piece. You can see there's a dotted line here and it says press line for pocket attachment. I make a lot of these. What I did was I took one of those plastic cutting mats and all I did was I cut this area here, not this side part, just this area here to help me with placement. So this is my exterior side. I'm going to flip it over to the lining side. The first thing I'm going to do, and you can see I already have my marks made, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this piece in half. I don't use this pattern piece for this because I've already sewn it together and lost a little bit in the seam allowance. So I want to find out truly where my center is. Then I open it back up and I use chalk to draw the line on here. You can actually use about anything to draw on here, because if you do your measurements right, you won't see these lines. They will be sewn together and they won't be visible in your final bag. If you're a little nervous or with your first one, I suggest using something that's removable like chalk or a removable pen. So the first thing you do is you draw that center line after you find the center. Once you have it, you'll take where that dotted line is and place it right there on your center. And you can open this up then and trace your second line down here with chalk or your marking tool. So now you have your center mark and you have the mark on this side. Then you will take this piece, you will take this line now, flip it, and place it on the center line this way and trace down this side. You will have 3 lines on this piece. You're going to repeat those same steps to put the 3 lines on your other piece. Draw your lines on your interior side. After I have those lines drawn, what I do is I use that piece, mine like I said is the plastic, I take it over to the ironing board, I push it down flat, I take out that card, I make sure the fabric's matching up here at the bottom and the top. Once I have that, I press it really good, just like I did with the center, to make that really good crease on it. I actually will add clips to this and just leave the clips there until I'm ready to sew it. That'll just help it to have a really good memory fold here, because that will help us when we're attaching it to the bag. So there's the 2 sides that I folded. I will go back and do that fold right in the middle again. And you can see I'm leaving these sides out, so they're just not in the way of that crease. Matching everything up, make sure that the tops and the bottoms are lined up. And so then I set it aside until I'm ready to use it. I'm going to repeat that for the other side, and then we'll move on to our next step. Now it is time to start making the lining. If you're using a cotton woven, you'll need to interface it with a medium weight interfacing like a SF101 or Royal Pixie Light. If you're using a cotton canvas, I wouldn't interface it. You don't have pattern pieces for these pieces. And while this looks like a square, it is not an exact square, so you'll really need to be careful with how you attach everything together. This is going to be the lining pieces. This is what you will see when you look inside your bag. It's best if this is a non-directional print. You're going to cut out 4 of these. I always cut mine out of the same print just to make it easier. You can cut them out of different prints if you want, but then if you do, you'll just want to make for sure you have them organized in the way you want them to look when you open the bag. For me, it's just easier to choose a non-directional print and to cut them all out of the same fabric. These pieces will be what we see when we open the zipper pockets. So you won't see this when you open the bag itself, the main zipper, but you will see it when you open one of the 3 zippers inside the bag. You're going to cut out 6 of this shape. On this piece, I do not add any interfacing at all. Whether I use a cotton woven or a cotton canvas, I don't add anything to this, and I don't suggest you do. There's no point in it, and it can just add some bulk for no real benefit. Let's take one of these lining pieces and one of the zipper pocket lining pieces, and I'm going to show you how I figure out what way I'm sewing this. I don't mark these. You can if you want. But if you line them up, you can see that the zipper lining fits perfectly on the main lining this way, but it fits on the sides exactly. If you turn it the other way, you can see that we have quite a bit of overhang. So this is wrong then. That means that we can't sew the zipper here on this side because we'd have all this overhang. We have to attach the zippers on this side. The next thing you'll need is your zippers. You really should use the exact zipper the pattern tells you. It is a 10-inch pre-made number 3 zipper. I know this is not typically what most of us use in bag making, but I promise this is the best way to do it. Because we have this little bit of area here without the zipper teeth, this allows us to sew this on the sides of the bag without it getting twisted, extra bulk, or even looking kind of folded or dented. We can sew through here. We have the stop, so it'll still lay nicely. The zipper pull won't come off, but we have just a little bit of ease in the seam allowance with less bulk. What you're going to do is you're going to start with one section just like this and attach the zipper like you always do on the top. That is taking this lining pocket, placing my zipper on it right sides up. I'm just going to baste these two pieces in place. I'm going to make for sure I have this zipper centered so a little bit will be hanging off both sides, and that's exactly what we want. So maybe 1/4 of an inch hanging off of this side, 1/4 of an inch hanging off of this side. So now let's center this on top and baste it in place. I'm just going to use 1/8 of an inch. I don't need to worry about moving my zipper pull yet because it won't be in the way since I'm using that smaller seam allowance. Now I'm going to take this main lining piece and I'm going to place it right sides together. I'm going to make for sure that I'm matching up the edges so that it fits perfectly with that lining pocket piece. If I did it the other way, like this, we can see we'd have quite a bit of overhang and that would be wrong. There's only one way that truly fits on this. So now I'm going to start by lining up one edge and then sewing all the way across with the full seam allowance given in the pattern. And I'll back stitch when I start and stop and just go from one edge to the other. When we get down to the end, you'll want to go ahead and move your zipper pull down because with the number 3 zipper tape, even if you have on a zipper foot, and you should still probably slide it down just so you get the best fit. So that's my first side done. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. So I lift up the zipper so that the pieces fall wrong sides together. Just do a quick finger press here. And then I'm going to top stitch from one edge to the next. I'm going to make for sure that I'm keeping that lining pulled down. A number 3 zipper tape is smaller, so you definitely want to make for sure that your lining is not creeping up in the back and getting in the way. Top stitch just that 1/8 of an inch away like we typically would do all the way down. So here's our first side. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing with this other side. Pull out another one of my zipper pocket lining pieces, place it right sides up, take this unsewn edge on the zipper tape, match them up at the top, but make sure we're matching up this side. Remember, we'll have just a little bit of overhang on each side with our zipper tape. Baste into place one more time. And now we're going to do that same thing with another one of our main lining pieces. Place it right sides down on top of here, just like we typically would do when we were sewing a zipper pouch. Make for sure again that you're getting the right side. Everything's lining up. You see how it's lining up here? But if I turn it this way, it would not line up. So it is right sides together with both the lining and the zipper. I'm going to sew from one edge to the other with the full seam allowance, back stitching when I start and stop. I'm going to once again open this up so a lining will go on one side and one of my lining pocket pieces. Let me just flip this over to the back so you can see what it looks like. You can see that here is the zipper pocket lining pieces. Here's my main lining pieces. Again, I'm finger pressing, I'm holding it flat, I'm making sure that little zipper pocket lining is not creeping up. So here's what we have at this point. We have 2 lining pieces, 2 zipper pocket lining pieces. We need to attach the rest of these pieces. It doesn't really matter which way you do this. I typically choose to have all of my zipper pulls going to the same side, closing the same way. Some people will like to do it even opposite, have one closing this way, one closing this way, then another one closing this way. It's really your choice. It doesn't matter at all. At this point where my print is not directional, it doesn't even matter which side it's on, if it's closing to the left or the right, because I can switch that at the last minute. So the main thing is to decide if you want all of your zipper pulls closing on the same side, or if you want one going one way, or if you don't care at all. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take and attach this zipper to this unsewn edge and add another zipper lining pocket. I'm going to go ahead, since I showed you those first steps, and just clip this like this and sew across here. So we have our main lining right sides up, our zipper right sides down, and our zipper pocket lining right sides down. This is just what we did, and it's no different than any other zipper pouch that we typically make. Now that we have these 3 pieces clipped together, let's just go ahead and sew across there with the full seam allowance. If you're someone who likes to use double-sided tape, this would be a great place to use it to attach all these pieces together. Now we have those pieces sewn together, let's go ahead and separate them. Put the lining zipper pocket and the main lining wrong sides together, finger press, and top stitch once more. At this point, we're going to do the same thing up here. We're going to take another main lining and another zipper pocket lining piece and attach it just the way we did. The main lining will go right sides together with this main lining. I'll add a few clips and then I will go ahead and add in the zipper pocket lining just to save a little time since we're doing several zippers all at once. You can see that zipper pocket lining piece is going to be right sides together with the other zipper pocket lining. Just taking care to match up the sides once again. You're going to sew all 3 of these pieces with that full seam allowance. Now that we have those pieces sewn together, you're once again going to open it up, so you should have 1 lining on each side of the zipper, 1 main lining on each side of the zipper, and we're just going to top stitch down this side. I will let you know that it's easy to forget top stitching these whenever you're doing a bunch all at once if you're chain or batch sewing, so always try to remember to get all your top stitching done. At this point, we have attached 1, 2, 3 of the main linings, and you can see we have 4 of our zipper pocket linings attached. We're going to add that last zipper to this side just like we did the other ones. I'm not going to show it on camera just because I've showed it several times, but you will take your zipper, place it right sides down with your main lining piece, take a zipper pocket lining piece and place it right sides down, sew across here, then pick it up so that these 2 pieces go wrong sides together, top stitch, and then do the same with your last main lining piece and your zipper pocket lining piece. I have my lining sewn completely together. It's too long to see it in the camera all in one shot, so let's take the time and look from one side all the way to the other. You can see at the first part we have no zipper, then we have 1 zipper, 2 zippers, 3, and then again on this end, nothing. No zipper on it here either. Let's flip it over just to look on the other side to make sure everything looks good. You can see that I have all 6 lining pieces that can open flat. Before we go on to the next step, make sure that your zippers can all open smoothly, that they're not getting caught in the lining. Make sure that you have top stitched everything. And if you want the zipper pulls to go in the same direction, make sure they're going the way you want. Now we're going to go on to that next step. The pattern tells us we are going to make all of these into functional pockets. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use the measurement given in the pattern. We're going to put our ruler down right here in the middle of the zipper teeth. So there's a little divot there. I set my ruler in that divot and then I draw a line using that pattern measurement. What I do is I draw a line to the right side of each zipper. It doesn't have to be the right side. It can be to the left. It can be one on the left, one on the right. It doesn't really matter so much, but for me it's just easy to remember that each zipper, I put my ruler down, go to that exact measurement and draw a line on the right side. So here is one line, here is one line, and then down here is another line. So you're drawing 3 lines. I do recommend this step to be done with a removable marking tool like chalk or a friction pen, because technically you would be able to look at the bottom of this section and see that marking. It might not be very obvious, but it's best if you can use something that you can remove. So now that we have the 3 lines made, it doesn't matter which order we sew them together, but we're going to sew all of these pockets. So I'll just start with the one closest to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the zipper. So I'm just going to grab by the zipper. I'm not grabbing the lining or the pockets or anything because I want it to be able to flop down, like fold down freely. I'm going to just have the zipper on top, and I'm going to make for sure that my linings are all going flat underneath. You can see the 2 lining pockets are lining up. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to take this while I have it lifted up, and I'm going to lay it so that I'm looking at that line that I just drew. You can use your hands to kind of feel to make sure nothing is puckered or bunching up, but you can also peek in here and make for sure that your lining pockets are laying flat. What you're going to do is you're going to start on one side, back stitch, so all the way down directly on that line you just made. So back stitch when I start, back stitch when I stop, so directly on the line you made. If you drew your line correctly, if you have all your fabrics laying correctly, we should be able to open this up and have a completed zipper pocket. So the first thing I'll do is I'll look to make for sure that I caught the linings. I did. You can trim this down to about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance here. I typically do it, but I'll do that off camera, but just trim it down. Open up your pocket, make for sure that it opens nicely and you can see it's caught completely and there's no puckers or bumps and you feel comfortable with it. So that is the first one done. Now let's flip this back over, grab your second zipper, just the zipper, not the linings, pick it up, kind of let it flop down, take it over to your sewing machine. Now we got this first one, we need to pull it out of the way so you can see it's standing up there. And now we're going to sew on that second line. It's the middle section. I take the time again to use my fingers to make sure the zipper pocket lining pieces are laying flat. And I'm just going to sew directly on that line, back stitching when I start and stop. Now we have 2 of these made. We are going to go to the last zipper, flip it back over, pick up that zipper pocket, let everything else fall down. Again, take it over to the sewing machine, make sure everything's laying smooth. Now we have 3 functional zipper pockets. You'll want to flip these over, trim up your lining, make sure that you caught your lining, make sure that the pockets are all functional, but this is how the lining will look. So now that we have this step, I'm going to go off camera and I'm going to trim up the seam allowance. I trimmed up the seam allowances there on the back. I have everything ready to go. I'm going to pull out that side panel piece that we talked about earlier and we have it just clipped and waiting. We're going to attach this side panel first to the easier side. That's going to be the side without these zipper pulls. Practice first on this easier side so that way when you come over to this side you already kind of got your head around what you're doing. The way I like to do this is a little different. I'm going to try to show it on camera, but it might be a little bit hard. But I like to stand up my pockets so that they're looking like this or something like this. They might not stay perfectly open. I'm going to take all these clips off of here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the center of this side panel piece directly on the center pocket. If you have a little bit of overhang on your zippers, you can trim it up. It doesn't bother me, but if it's bothering you, trim that up. Let me set this down because it's going to keep falling. The thing I want you to pay attention to is I really want these pockets in between my 2 rows of stitches here. So you can see I have this basting stitch here at the bottom, then I have the top stitching here at the top. I'm basically going to be sewing in between this area and I want my lining piece to fit there. So take the middle section of the side panel and just drape it across that middle pocket. What I want is this row of stitching to be right at the bottom of this. So that stitching we just did in the previous step, that's pretty much going to be where the bottom or the edge of your side panel is. Go ahead and add a clip there. Make sure that you're taking the time to push this lining piece into the crease here. You want it to be firmly in the crease. We're only sewing this with I think 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so we got to make for sure we catch this pocket. If you look here at the top, you should have about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch of space where the pocket is not going to be. That's what you want, that's what you should have. When we start sewing, we'll start sewing here at that bottom row of stitching. So we'll start sewing here, back stitch, go all the way down, and then we'll stop before we go over the top stitching. So whenever we get to that line of top stitching, we'll back stitch here, and then that will be how we sew this piece on. So I'm putting my foot down there where that basting row where I close this, I'm putting my foot down there. That is where I'm going to start sewing, back stitch. And then I am pretty sure it's 1/4 of an inch, so that's what I'm using. If not, it's okay. Whenever I go over that zipper, I'm going to go really slow because I know I have that metal stop here. I don't feel like it's anywhere near where you'll hit it, but still just go slow. Hand crank if you're really nervous. Keep going past, go up to that row of top stitching, back stitch, and I do usually 2 stitches, and then break your stitches, and that is your first one attached. Go ahead and pull it back, make sure it's attached securely. There is several times I do it and I'll have a gap and I'll have to go back in and do it better. So if you can, stand it back up again, take your second side, do the same thing. In that crease, you're going to fit in this lining pocket piece. You're going to match up that row of stitches you just made. That's where the bottom of the side panel will be. Add your clips, making sure that the pocket is securely in the crease. And then this one's a little trickier to sew, so I'm going to flip it over. So I'm looking at the middle and I already did. I'm going to pull it back out of the way, start at the bottom and back stitch and sew down to the top or up to the top, I don't know. The back stitch, go all the way up to your previous row of top stitching, watching your metal zipper stop. Break those stitches, stand it back up again. Do the same thing with this last side piece. This one will definitely be your hardest one to sew, so you can choose to push everything out of the way and sew from the bottom up that we've been sewing, or if you're comfortable, you can go ahead and start at the top. Just make sure everything is lining up at the top and start then where your top stitching ends, or right below your top stitching, and start going down, definitely back stitch. And now you have all 3 attached. You will have this gap here, don't worry, that's okay. It won't be a gap at the end. When we do this on the other side, we're gonna have just that little bit of a gap there when we move the zipper pull out of the way. Honestly, you don't really need to move your zipper pull all the way far because we don't get close to this area here, but the zipper pull has just a little bit of bulk. So it's not so much the needle hitting it as that it could create an issue with it not being able to fit perfectly in the creases for your side panel. You're going to repeat the same steps we just did over here, and you can see how we're having just this nice neat accordion pocket there. It's already looking so cute. I'm going to go off camera and finish the other one. I have my lining completely finished, so it is done. Now it's time to join the lining and the exterior together to finish up this pouch. For the exterior, I like to use a cotton canvas, and then I like to add a layer of thermolan or a fusible fleece on the back of it. If you have cotton woven, definitely you can use that. I would just add a layer of SF101, Royal Pixie Light, or any other medium weight interfacing you like, as well as the fleece or thermolan. You can see that my exterior and the lining are about the same size. This is what you want. Your exterior is the correct size. That is coming directly from the pattern piece. This lining though, since you're doing a lot of constructing, it could shift. If your lining is over 1/2 inch to 1 inch shorter than your exterior, you would probably want to add a strip on to each side to make it even. If your lining is bigger than your exterior, that's okay. You can trim it down, but if the lining is too short, it would create problems, probably with the way the bag will look and how it'll all fit together. The first thing I do is I take my exterior and I just fold it in half, and I make little tiny snips on the center to help me line everything up perfectly. I'm going to place my exterior wrong sides up. I'm going to place my lining on top of it so that they are wrong sides together. I'm going to match up the centers. We're going to go ahead and consider this middle slot here on the side panel, the center, and match it up with that center mark. So I'm just lightly putting it in place now, not doing any clipping yet. I'm going to come over to this side and make sure that this side piece is in line with this center. Once I have them both kind of centered in place, what I'm going to do is going to be a little bit odd. First, I'm going to start just adding a clip here at each end, just so it doesn't shift completely whenever I'm moving it around. I do expect that I'll have to adjust this clip, so don't expect it to stay perfectly there. but I'm just going to use it so while I'm doing the shifting, it's not going completely out of alignment. So I'm going to open up my side panels, and I'm going to take this top part and I'm going to fold it to the left. So open it up, push everything down. It's folding out flat and it's looking kind of crazy, and I'm going to start matching up this side edge with my exterior. Flattening it out, you can see I'm just smushing and flattening, and all my zippers are going to the left. Pulling this side panel down so it matches my exterior. Adding a clip there, clip here in the middle on this part. Pulling this side piece that'll be wanting to go up, pull it down, add a clip there. And then I'm gonna adjust these bottom pieces to make for sure they're in alignment. You can see how crazy it looks. Don't be alarmed about that at all. Let's go over to the other side. Add those clips there on the bottom of this side, the bottom of the other side, making sure they're lining up pretty decently. Don't expect perfection at this point. Now we're going to take this piece, hold the sides just like we did, and again shift it all to the left one more time. So they're kind of being pushed in different directions so that they balance out and look straight in the end. I know it seems odd, but this is the way I find that I get the best fit. I'm going to just start clipping just like I did on the other side. If you feel a pucker like I do, put your finger in there, smooth it out. This one's wanting to shift a little, so I'm going to have to kind of use my fingers to make sure the edges are lining up. Once you have this clipped into place, go ahead and let it go back up and just kind of look at it. Okay, so you can see the pockets are looking decently straight. That's great. But I also want my edges to be somewhat close. They don't have to be perfect. I can see that this one's a little bit ahead of this one, but I can also see there's some overhang on this lining piece that I'm going to have to trim off, which means they'll probably be pretty perfect. Check this on this. Yep. So mine, honestly, even though they might look a little crooked now, I have some overhang on my lining. Am I worried about that overhang? No, because I know my exterior is the true size I want. But I do need to flip this over and look at my exterior. Make sure that everything is clipped, like all along the sides. We got this pucker here. Let's make sure we get that. Yeah, that's okay. Anytime I teach the class, everybody is so stressed about this step. They're so worried about being perfect here. Try to relax and not worry too much, because it almost always looks perfect at the end. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew down these sides to secure them first, and then we'll sew along the edges. I'll wait for the last to sew the short edges because lots of times I'll need to trim them up. I rarely have to trim anything up on the sides, but on the edges sometimes I'll have some shifting of the materials. So to sew this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push it down to the left again. If I have my best choice, I'm going to have all of these seams on the side going the same way. All of mine are going to the right, which is perfect, and I can just sew all along here. If you're unable to get your sew going on the same direction, it's okay. It's just not what I prefer to do, but there's lots of times I've had to have one of my seams going the opposite way, and I just make it work, and it's not a problem. It just creates a little more bulk. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just using my fingers to make sure this is staying in line. I'm just going to base this in place. We are going to come back to bind this, so I don't have to worry about sewing with a perfect seam allowance. I'm just doing that 1/8 of an inch basting to get everything locked into place. Every stitch I take, I'm making sure everything is lining up. I'm keeping my hand pushing all of these pieces to the left, and I'm just going to keep it there the whole time. Coming over my first side seam, holding it down, going really slow so I don't shift it while I'm sewing. My second one's a little bunchy, and you can even snip in there to make it lay a little bit flatter, which is what I'm going to do. So what that means is that stitch, I went a little bit below my basting stitch there, so whenever I take that stitch out, it'll lay flat and I can sew over easier. This is the area where you will have that little bit of extra bulk. So if you sew on a domestic machine that can't handle bulk, you may want to consider keeping the fleece out of the seam allowance here so that you don't have as much bulk on this step. Here is how that first side looks sewn. I'm going to trim just a little here. I don't need to trim a lot. Don't forget we're coming in with the binding and it's going to clean all this up, but I'll just trim some of my extra thread and some where the fleece is hanging out a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Then we'll sew across these short edges here, but if you have any overhang, it's kind of best to square it up, trim it up, make sure it's even. So if you have a lot of overhang and you need to take some off, you might want to just grab out your ruler and make sure it's straight across here. But to start this side, go ahead and again push them to the left and start basting these pieces together. I should mention, when I say trim up your sides here, I mean just the lining, unless it's just a little bit to straighten up that edge. So now let's go ahead and sew across these short ends. Now, if you wanted to add a cork tag or something on the outside of this, you would want to add it to the exterior on either side. You could do it now and sew through both layers, or you could do it before you attach these pieces together and sew a cork tag on here. We're going to be bonding across this edge. If you wanted to add a woven label, it would be cute to add a woven label, maybe off-centered, not centered. I think it would look a little bit better here, and then the bonding would cover that raw edge. I'm not going to do those steps, but if you wanted to, you can. What I'm going to do now is that I have this completed. You can see how cute this looks. I'm going to trim up some of my extra threads, get everything smoothed up. I'm going to grab out my bonding and my zipper, and we'll get ready to do those steps. I'm going to be using a number 5 piece of zipper tape by the yard. The pattern calls for you to actually use a number 3 zipper, and it's going to be a finished zipper. I've done it that way, but it is extremely hard. I feel like I like it better with a number 5. I feel like it's much easier. But I do want to point out, if you're using a number 5, you will either need to do your zipper tab like I'm going to do mine, or you will need to increase the size of the zipper tab that they use. The way they do the zipper tab in this pattern is they make almost like a little cocoon for it, and you slip it on the end of the zipper. It's super cute. I like it. I've done it plenty of times, but you would need to increase it by 1/4 inch on each side and just be really careful with your seam allowance so that it would fit your number 5 zipper tape. The way I do it is just putting a piece of raw edge material like a vinyl on the edge here, and it makes it super simple, but you will see the raw edge of the vinyl zipper tab on this piece at the end. If that bothers you, you could definitely do it the other way. Before I attach this zipper to this bag though, I need to bond the sides first. You're going to cut out 4 pieces of bonding according to the pattern measurements. The 2 longer strips though, that's going to go along the short sides. I know it seems odd, but we're going to be covering the zipper tape. The shorter pieces of bonding, your 2 short pieces of bonding, are going to be what we're going to use on these longer sides. There's lots of different ways to bond. I'm just going to do it the way that I like to do it with something like this, and that is going to be using a cotton woven, doing a single fold. You can choose to use whatever method works best for you. And so this width actually on this side would be a little bit too big, so I'll probably trim it down off camera. I cut out bonding all the time, and I never paid too much attention to how wide I cut it because I could be bonding a bag with a lot of foam. But for this one, this is a little bit too wide because if I fold it over, I'd have a lot of extra width there. So for the side though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it back down again to the left, and this time we're going to sew this bonding on. We're placing the bonding right sides together with this lining. And now I'm going to sew all down this side with the full seam allowance. Again, the pattern, I'm going to go from one edge all the way down to the other edge, back stitching when I start and stop. When you come over the bulky areas, just take your time, go slow. If your machine really struggles, you can hand crank. I have a lot of overhang on mine, no big deal, I'll trim it off. But what I'm going to do now that I have this attached with that first row of stitching, I'm just going to pull it back, and I'm going to make for sure that I'm covering all of my edges. You can see that everything looks nice and neat there. I did catch that seam really well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over to the exterior side. I'm going to roll that raw edge, fold it to where it's meeting the raw edge of this exterior, and then I'm just going to flip it over. I want it to just cover those stitches that I just did. If it's overlapping too much, you can even choose to make your fold a little tighter. And so instead of it just meeting this edge, I can have it even kind of coming over this way to where I'm folding it a little thicker. It's so simple to do it this way so that you can always get a perfect fit, even if you didn't cut your binding perfectly the first time. So now that I know that I have some extra overhang on this one, I will definitely want to trim down the piece whenever I'm adding it to the other side because there's way less bulk there. And I wouldn't want this binding to be too thick so that it got in the way of closing the zipper properly. So I'm just kind of tucking it in and folding it so that the folded edge just meets that row of stitches I just did. That way I can sew with that same seam allowance and catch this binding really neatly so that it looks good on both the front and the back. So I have everything clipped into place. You can see I have the finished edge clipped here, flip it over, and you can see the finished edge there. We are going to sew all along this piece using the seam allowance given the pattern. It's the seam allowance we just used to attach the binding in the first place. I'm going to go ahead and trim up the overhang. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to repeat those same steps to sew the binding on the other side. And now that I have both of the side edges bound, it's time to work on these short edges. You're going to pull out that zipper tape, make sure you mark your centers on your zipper tape and you mark the centers on both the short sides. Go ahead and place the zipper tape right sides up on top of the lining. You're going to match up those centers, and I usually just use 3 clips to clip this all along that short edge. And now I'm going to baste in place just along that edge with the 1/8 of an inch. The pattern calls for you to use a number 3 zipper here and a finished zipper, not zipper by the yard. So if you are using a number 3 zipper that is a completed zipper, not a zipper by the yard piece of tape, you would not be able to separate these 2 pieces. What you would do is you would take this center mark and you would pull it over and you'd match it with the center mark on the other side and go ahead and clip in place like this, and you would have to sew it this way. Since we have the option to separate ours, we're going to go ahead and separate them. Since I'm making sure that I'm matching up the centers, it won't be hard to add the zipper pulls on here because it won't be an issue of getting them even. But what I'll do now is I'll just separate mine. But again, I'm just attaching it so that it is right sides up to the lining, basting it in place. Now that I have the zipper attached, I'm going to pull out those binding strips and I'm going to add them to the zipper. As I mentioned, my binding is wider than it should be. I was going to go off camera and cut it down, but I decided I'm going to be a little bit lazier and I'm just going to sew this on, not single fold, but I'm going to fold it wrong sides together and just attach this raw edge to the raw edge or unfinished edge of the zipper tape. It's a different way to do binding, and I don't do this method a lot. I like the method. I'm just usually a little bit too lazy to cut out the binding wide enough, but I know my binding's too wide on this one, so that's why I'm going to do it this way. So I'm just going to have the binding folded wrong sides together and clip it with the edge of the zipper without the teeth. I have the binding clipped on. Just make sure you pay attention to the pattern instructions for cutting your binding. I did not. I just cut mine into strips. Pay attention to that measurement and yours will be fine. But what you're going to do is you're going to sew this binding onto the zipper tape. So you'll start all the way on one edge. We'll sew it to the zipper tape and this bag once we get to this section. But for right now, we are just sewing it onto the zipper tape with the seam allowance given in the pattern. This is the full seam allowance, so you're not just doing the 1/8 of an inch here. Go ahead and trim up any extra binding you might have. Don't trim up your zipper tape yet. Keep your zipper tape the same measurement given in the pattern. And if you are doing like the pattern says, you're going to do the same double fold that we did on this side. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do a single fold. So all I'm going to do is wrap this edge around so that it meets and covers those stitches. I don't have to tuck mine in since it is already a finished edge. I'm going to clip all this to this exterior side, and then I'll sew with the seam allowance once again to connect these two pieces. Once you have that first row of binding on, you're going to complete those same steps to attach it to the other side. You can see it is attached on the back as well as on the lining side. So lining exterior, all of it looks good. So we're going to sew the binding on this side. After I have it sewn on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 zipper pulls. You can only add 1 if you want, or you can do 2. So I'll add a zipper pull to each side and have mine closing in the middle. When I come back, the only thing we need to do will be to add the zipper tabs and attach it to the bag, and then our adorable pouch is done. I have the binding done, I have the zipper pulls, I have 2 of them on there in the middle. I went ahead and attached the zipper into this side, but I want to show you how I do it on the other side. The first thing you want to do is you want to take the zipper down to the middle and see if you like the shape. Depending on how long you cut your zipper tape, if you use the pattern measurements, it's going to be like this. But say you wanted your zipper tape longer, it may have a bigger handle here and you may not like it that long, so make sure you like the length of it and trim it up if you need to. For the way I'm going to do mine is to cover this raw edge, I'm just going to grab a scrap piece of vinyl. I cut it in a square. I never measure the cut, but it is about 1.5 on both sides. I wrap it around the end, making sure it matches up on both sides. And then I'm just going to top stitch this, just to attach it. I'll do my top stitching just 1/8 of an inch away from that raw edge there at the top. I'm going to flip this up so I can get it a little bit closer. Trim up any overhang if you have it. If you have a machine that's a domestic and it doesn't do good sewing over bulk, you can make for sure that the zipper tape is not at the main bottom of this. It's kind of kept out of the seam allowance so that whenever you attach it to this bottom piece, it won't be as tricky of a sew. But what you're going to do is you're going to find the middle, you're going to center the zipper tape on there, and you're going to have the 2 edges matching up. So they're going to be flush, and then you'll just sew across here to attach those 2 pieces. So this time I'm going to kind of push everything back because I want it to be a nice straight sew here and look as neat as possible. Definitely backstitch when you start and stop here. You'll probably need to straighten this out by just pulling at the top, getting everything straight. Here is how this adorable little pouch looks. It's super cute, but look how convenient it is. I love this for a back to school pattern because this is so convenient for storage. You not only have the 3 zipper pockets, but you have the spaces in between. Lots of times I will get this to people and they will put in school accessories and things like that, but most of them use it for getting ready. But kids could definitely use this to store anything they need to get ready in the morning. Comb, hairbrush, hair supplies, any of their toiletries that they may need, dental floss, toothpaste, things like that, so they can just grab it and go and they know where everything is. It could also do great on their desk at home when they're doing their homework, filled with all their writing utensils, any supplies they need to complete projects at home, or just anything that they want to keep more organized to make the school days go a little bit smoother. This is one of my best sellers at my craft shows. It is a gift that's always well received if I give it as a gift. And as you can see, it's not really that hard to come together, and I just love it so much. This is the Sew Together bag by Sew Demented. All of my fabrics are from J&R Edwards. I'm going to have a link to both in my description. Thank you so much for watching another sewing marathon video, and let me know in the comments if you think that this style of sewing marathons, where it's more of a theme instead of one pattern, if you like it better this way or if you prefer the other way that we were doing them. Let us know what you think, and I hope you're able to watch all the other videos today and just be inspired to make your school days go a little bit more organized. Thanks so much for watching and have a wonderful day.